This is Victoria Cartagena. I play Renee Montoya on Gotham, and you're listening to Gotham TV Podcast.
Hey, this is Andrew Stewart-Jones. I play Crispus Allen on Gotham, and you are listening to Gotham TV Podcast.
Welcome back to Gotham TV Podcast. This is episode 43 of the podcast about the hit show Gotham and the connected DC universe. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hi, and I'm one of your other hosts, John.
And we're here to talk about Gotham episode 18, Everyone Has a Cobblepot. Do you have a Cobblepot, John?
Yes, and it's very itchy at the moment. But not really.
Not really.
And not either in the sense that Harvey Bullock and actually Jim Gordon have. I have never tried to kill one, a Cobblepot,
No.
a person, or indeed attempted to, or been successful in. So, no, I don't think I have a Cobblepot, but I also thought it may be referencing something else.
Okay. Excellent.
But do you have a Cobblepot?
I've never had a Cobblepot, no, but I'd like one. Especially those really cute penguin versions of them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean one of the action figures that's being released as well?
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm slightly dubious about the quality of them personally, but I find action figures that try and replicate the human form, it's very difficult to get it right. Sometimes I just find statues of actual real life people living, breathing, sometimes just look really strange, and unfortunately I felt these did look slightly strange. However, though, I did think Penguins or Oswald Cobblepot's one was by far and away the best.
Yeah, so this is the three action figures. Cameron Beacondova as Selena Kyle, Robin Lord Taylor as Oswald Cobblepot, and Ben McKenzie's version of Jim Gordon, all three being released this summer for about $20. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's also a statue of Ben McKenzie's Jim Gordon being released for a lot more expensive, about £100, and that's looks much more like the Jim Gordon that we know and love from Gotham.
Definitely, but I'm digressing,
Yeah.
and in fairness, I'm probably going to just digress a slight bit more for everyone who is listening to Gotham TV Podcast, is watching Gotham. We also have a sister podcast, Defenders TV Podcast, which actually looks at the Marvel, don't boo or hiss at this stage, but it looks at the Marvel universe, in particular the Marvel Netflix TV shows, Daredevil, which is currently playing, but also looking forward to AKA Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and the Iron Fist, all moving towards the mini-series Defenders. We also do look at the Marvel connected world in that, and so we do now have our Avengers Age of Ultron review, our epic piece of reviewing. Myself, John, Derek, and two other people that podcast with us on the Defenders TV podcast, Irene and Chris. And we have done our opus day, I suppose, really, of podcasting. It was released on the 23rd of April in Ireland and the UK, and it's coming in at just over 2 hours of discussion and chat about all our favourite things and some of the things that maybe we didn't quite like so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good fun chat, fun discussion, and loads of spoilers. So we know it's only being released in the US this week as you hear this podcast. But I think once you've seen the movie, pop on over to defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes and you'll be able to pick up our review of Avengers Age of Ultron. It's well worth a listen, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of which as well, remember you can find us at gothamtvpodcast.com/iTunes. You can also find us on any other good podcast catchers such as Stitcher, Player FM. You can follow us on Twitter at gothamtvpodcast.com. And of course, you can find us on Google Plus and Facebook. Just search Gotham TV Podcast and follow us there, like our page, and interact with us there.
And as we're getting close to the end of the season of Gotham, we just wanted to reiterate and repeat about our competition to win a signed Penguin print by Christopher Uminga, and also the first 5 issues of Gotham by Midnight, featuring artwork by Ben Temple-Smith, one of our favourite artists. All you need to do is send us in some feedback through Twitter, Facebook, through our email address, which is feedback@gothamtvpodcast.com. And if we discuss it on the show, you go into the hat, and on the final episode review show that we do, we'll pick out a winner anywhere across the world and send them the nice prize pack.
Exactly. It's open to everyone. And of course, if you leave a review for us on iTunes, you will also enter into the draw, as that's one of the best ways to share our podcast with other people through reviewing on iTunes. So get those thoughts and comments coming in, and we can't wait to get them.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I think we're into our review for Everyone Has a Cobblepot.
Oh, mine started up again.
So episode 18 of Gotham, Everyone Has a Cobblepot, was directed by Bill Eagles, who's directed previous episodes of Gotham, and also written by Megan Moyston Brown, who wrote Welcome Back, Jim Gordon. We spoke about it in the episode that was her first episode of Gotham, her first real episode of TV, and now she gets a second episode within 5, so she's obviously one of the new go-to people for Gotham.
And Welcome Back, Jim Gordon was actually one of my favourites. It really was good. It reminded me very much of Gotham Central. So I was looking forward to this episode, definitely.
Yeah, me too. Do you want to give us your synopsis to give us some detail on what we're talking about?
Alfred wakes up and begins to recover from the wounds inflicted by best mate, Reggie, who Bruce now believes to be the key to the dodgy goings-on at Wayne Enterprises. At the same time, Flass has the charges against him dropped by Commissioner Loeb after a GCPD witness comes forward to exonerate him. However, as Jim investigates Flass's release, it transpires that the witness was forced to give evidence by the dangerous and corrupt Loeb, who holds files on all the GCPD staff containing sensitive information and all their dirty little secrets. Elsewhere, at Dr. Dulmacher's facility, Fish finally meets the man himself and appears to join forces with him as she rises to senior management. Dulmacher is confident of Fish's loyalty as she seemingly betrays her previous allegiance to the prisoners, and of course because the facility is shown to be located on a frozen, barren and windswept island far away from Gotham. Meanwhile, aided by Oswald, Jim's very own Cobblepot, Harvey, Bullock and Jim make their way to a remote farm run by Margie and her husband in an attempt to get Loeb's secret files, but stumble upon a bigger, darker, more crazy secret that Jim uses as leverage against Commissioner Loeb himself.
Very, very detailed synopsis. Well done, John. Yeah, this is another one that felt like Batman Year One, felt like that kind of character of Commissioner Loeb being really developed in this episode as a really central and corrupt guy who wants to take out Jim, who's not on side with his plan. Really liked this episode.
Yeah, big time. The sort of collaboration between Flass and Loeb in this episode was great. And I loved the whole theme that it was very much all about people's secrets being discovered, or secrets such as even Oswald's from Falcone and Maroney being kept away from them. All these secrets seemed to be the theme of this episode, and I really liked that. I thought it added a lot. We even see sort of Harvey's secret as well. So this was great. I thought it was a really nice episode. It really had a sneaky, secrety little theme running through it, which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. With that, let's crack into our top 5 case points for this episode. John, do you want to give us your first point?
Yeah, well, running with the theme of secrets, it was Harvey Bullock's secret. And in a sense, then, his redemption from his secret and his lie. But firstly, it was the secret that is contained within Commissioner Loeb's files that we find out. He's obviously got his Cobblepot, which he understands what Jim had to go through because he had to do that himself. But in this sense, he killed the person.
Yeah.
He dumped the body. The person was gotten rid of. So he's not in the fortunate position that Jim is, where his Cobblepot ultimately didn't die. This huge secret of which Loeb knows everything about, and which forces Harvey to be a witness in favour and for Flass in order to exonerate him.
Yeah.
And I just thought that this really nicely just filled out Harvey Bullock's character so much. It felt like a bit of the spirit of the goat to me, where it really added something to Harvey's character, to some of his demeanor, and he was quite it was much more subdued in some extent in this episode. It was much more the serious Harvey Bullock rather than the comedy Harvey Bullock.
Yeah.
And I really, really liked that. But I just thought it really neatly sort of connected Jim and Harvey together, because they've both got this one thing in common. And I loved that. Anything to do with Harvey Bullock, I really like, and I especially like these episodes that really get into the psyche of Harvey Bullock, because he is complex. He, on the face of it, comes across as uncaring. He comes across as maybe even corrupt to some people, but actually underneath that, he is pretty loyal to his partner. He does want to see the bad guys get caught, but he is also caught a bit between a rock and a hard place in relation to some of the connections he's had with mobsters and crime lords, and what he's had to do. And, this secret, you can see angers Jim when he finally finds out that it was Harvey who helped Flask get released and get the charges dropped. But then what infuriates Jim even more is the connection to Commissioner Loeb. These two have been like two bulls butting heads. They really have, So this is just simply a red rag for Jim Gordon as soon as Commissioner Loeb gets a mention. And I really liked it. I thought then as well, the redemption that occurs for Harvey Bullock, where, he's got Detective Griggs, hanging out the car whilst it's speeding along the road in the ice and snow and slush. I thought that was great. That was dark comedy Harvey Bullock for me, and brilliant. Loved it. Loved Harvey Bullock in this episode. Really did.
Yeah, definitely. I also really liked the setup from the title of the episode, that everyone has a Cobblepot. I was wondering what that meant months ago when I saw the title come up, and the idea that Harvey uses this to describe that everybody has a secret that Loeb holds over their head. He's fully aware now that Jim didn't kill Oswald, obviously. In the first episode, it took him a long time to come around to the idea that Jim didn't kill Oswald. And isn't Jim lucky that he didn't, because Loeb would be holding that over Jim now. Jim's still the incorruptible one. Jim is still the only one that Loeb doesn't have something on, and therefore he can go and challenge Loeb for the stuff that he's been doing for 20 years now. Essentially, it's the way it's described, that Griggs was his former partner, and he had something that he was holding over him for this long as well. He's been constantly building up his files on everybody who worked within the GCPD and everybody else, and using this against him to further his career, essentially. And now Jim is on the warpath. Really interesting element to it was that what he finds out from Grigg is that not only is Loeb corrupt, he's also working with Falcone. So he's directly working with the biggest nemesis on the show as well. So that was
a big reveal, actually, that Commissioner Loeb is so entwined with Falcone. We've seen that with the mayor already.
Yeah.
But with Commissioner Loeb, it's not really been identified that he was intrinsically that linked with Falcone. He obviously recognizes maybe who his political masters are, but this is a really cozy relationship, just as cozy as the relationship that the mayor had with him were, as we'll see later, with where Loeb's files may be kept. Jim and Harvey think that that's in a Falcone sort of safe house.
Yeah.
But there is a really lot of dodgy links here between Commissioner Loeb and Falcone.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, Harvey does say half the cops on the force have got a Cobblepot as well. Yeah. And I like the way he describes how this is the source of all his power, i.e. Commissioner Loeb's. I thought it was a really interesting way of describing it, almost like it was a superpower that he has all this information. It's like he's Information Man or something like that.
The worst superhero in Gotham.
Well, yeah. And we have a great line as well from Jim Gordon, as you say. He is the incorruptible one. Here it is.
Go ahead, arrest me, but don't stop there. Half the cops on the GCPD have a Cobblepot, and Loeb has the goods on all of them. That is what Loeb does.
Well, it ends now.
Jim, hey, going after Flass was bad enough. Going after Loeb is suicide, plain and simple.
So what? I'm supposed to stay quiet, fall in line like the rest of you?
That would be a good idea.
The day I do that is the day I quit being a cop.
And I love this line because it's after Harvey has been explaining everything, and Harvey has essentially asked him to fall in line like everyone else does, and it just adds to this incorruptibleness of Jim Gordon. Yes, he makes bad choices sometimes, as we'll see even later on in this episode, but he doesn't have too much over him, if anything, that Loeb can use, and that's why Loeb is at loggerheads with Jim, and Jim is at loggerheads with Loeb because of the sneakiness of his character, and obviously that tight relationship with Flass, because I think he's nominating him for a job as the head of the police union.
That's right.
So it's really mucky and non-transparent, this whole relationship between them. And I mean, that's great in itself, but it really just sets Jim off at loggerheads with Commissioner Loeb all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. But just to your point about Harvey himself, there is also a great line from Harvey in the episode where he essentially describes, what he's been going through all these years, knowing that he's done something that he never wanted to do in the first place, creating his Cobblepot, essentially. He says, you tell yourself, I'll just do this one bad thing. All the good things I'll do later will make up for it. But they don't. It's a good moment for Harvey that he essentially is saying that he did that one bad thing. He'll try his best to get back from doing that, just that one moment of lapsed judgment, essentially. But he's never come back from that. He's continued to do those one or two little bad things over time, like working with fish, I presume is what he's talking about, like helping out criminals or turning a blind eye to other cops, and what Loeb is doing. And now he's saying, it'll never wash. If you do that one bad thing, you'll never come back from it, essentially, which I thought was a really good element for Harvey in this episode.
Yeah, no, definitely. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. But Derek, what's your first point?
My first point is a continuation of my points over the last couple of weeks. I've actually spoken about Fish's story a lot more than I was expecting to. And once again, they pull it out of the bag in this episode. Fish meeting Dr. Dollmaker, or the Dollmaker, is a great moment in this episode. She gets her new eyeball. She now has a blue eye and a brown eye. Really stark contrast for this character, really stands out, which is obviously what it's meant to do. But starting to kind of unravel what the Dr. Dollmaker's plan is and what he's actually doing with all these body parts is really interesting. He looks like he set up a kind of a surgery for high class clients. But why would a high class client fly into this place so far out of the way, which is so distant from any city? It's not exactly the most well put together place. It seems like a slightly cut price place for people that have maybe are old money or running out of money potentially.
Yeah.
That's kind of the impression that I get. But particularly on Fish, the fact that she turns on her basement crowd who've made her their leader and done everything to get her to the point of meeting Dollmaker, thinking that they're going to get away, thinking that they're going to be released. It looks like she's turned on them. She sacrifices two of her most ardent supporters in the basement, essentially, just because they're on the list of Dr. Dollmaker. I thought that was a really interesting twist, and obviously it's going to play out over the next couple of weeks. But again, I'm excited by her story and excited by what's happening with Jada Pinkett Smith's character in this episode.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that she kind of wanted to be his right-hand man, and half of me was expecting, if not in this episode, somewhere along the line towards the end of this season, Dr. Dollmaker may not be with us for season 2. I have this slight feeling something may happen to him, certainly because her turning on her prisoners that she had brought through to be this rebellious crowd against the prison guards and against the people, the senior management upstairs. I thought it was really, it felt like a betrayal, and it felt like something Fish wouldn't necessarily do. And in my own head, I'm thinking she is doing this in order to do what she was set out to do, which was to escape from the facility. She obviously is now fully aware that she's also got to escape from an island in the middle of nowhere, looking pretty cold, snowy, and miserable. But I thought it was really interesting that she took Kelly, Dashiell Eves is the actor. Like, he's been there in 5 episodes. He was the one that Fish bonded with immediately and has kind of been her right-hand man. And she sacrifices him. And it'll be interesting now to see whether he survives or whether he is literally just cut up into parts for use with other people. But I thought this was, odd that she behaved like that, but I think it's for a higher purpose in order to escape and in order to probably get her revenge on Dr. Francis Dulnacker.
Yeah, she essentially says at the end of the episode, or the end of her part of the episode, is that she tells them all their sacrifice means your survival. So she still sounds like to them, or she's still putting forward the position to them that she's working for the basement people, as we'll call them. She's still making that point, but I'm still wondering whether she's just doing all of this to get herself out and get herself away and doesn't really care about the people in the basement. It never struck me that Fish was one to be a protector for everybody, so this is why this storyline has been so interesting to me. It usually struck me that she would be the person that would fight for herself and do everything to get herself to the best position possible, which is now, essentially the new right-hand man to Dulnacker, as you said.
Yeah, or maybe Kelly, her right-hand man, is simply just being removed from the prison, and maybe he will be working for her upstairs.
Perhaps.
I doubt that will happen, but it could be another way in which he isn't actually being sacrificed as such. But I thought it was a really interesting little development on that story too. Definitely.
There is one element that I do want to pull out though, because I think I wrote it in my notes about 4 times because I couldn't believe how bad it was. The former office manager who we saw in the last 2 episodes dealing with Fish Mooney. And we have the reveal of his head attached to a woman's body. Terrible CGI, I thought. I thought it was really awful and really stood out as it was difficult to watch purely because of how bad it was made. We did get a comment on Twitter when we were watching the episode and tweeting about it. We did get a comment on Twitter saying at least he has good nail varnish, because he has these lovely red nails that he's staring at from his head newly attached to a young woman's body. But I really thought it was poor. I thought it was about the level of maybe Mars Attacks was probably better 10 years ago with Pierce Brosnan's head being attached to a dog. But
love that film.
I know. But yeah, I thought it was a bit of an odd choice. It should have been probably something a bit more gruesome. It just felt weird and looked strange.
Yeah, but it reminded me of Mars Attacks. It also reminded me of Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas, Jack-o'-lantern's love interest, because even the arms, the female arms and hands and legs, they were all stitched together as well, and it looked like Sally, who was a doll herself within that stop motion animation. So maybe that's how bad the CG was, that I thought it looked like stop motion animation. But nonetheless, yeah, I mean, it's always difficult sometimes with CG in TV.
Yeah.
Sometimes it looks absolutely brilliant and looks just as good as anything you see on the big screen. And then sometimes you kind of go, that was done with a TV budget. I can see that. Yeah. And sometimes it's difficult to pull it off sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think maybe you're right. They just didn't pull it off here. Yeah. And some of the other CG work in this series has been really good, such as with The Scarecrow, where Gerald Crane sees his wife burning. That was really, really good. So I suppose it's just how it falls and how it looks within the context,
Yeah, absolutely. But it doesn't take away from Fish's story. I thought it was a really good story. John, do you want to give us your second point?
Yeah, it kind of follows on from my first, and that's really Loeb's secret. And both of his secrets here, both the fact that he's now found to have files on everyone containing sensitive information or their dirty laundry that he can use to bribe them. He can hold them to ransom and blackmail them with all these files. And I loved that notion that that's where he is. That is why he's there.
Yeah.
And maybe even why he got promoted, because he even knew stuff maybe on the mayor. And he said, I want to buy into this. I want the influence and the power. And so gets promoted.
Yeah.
And even as far back as when he's on the force, this is a calculated man that you find from it. He's keeping his own partner's information, Detective Griggs, as well.
Yeah.
That it goes that far and deep, the network, that his old partner from when they were both detectives is also embroiled into this. And I just thought that was a really nice touch. It made him so calculated. It made him so powerful.
Definitely.
In terms of running and controlling that organization, and to come up then against Jim, like I said previously, was just a nice conflict between these two men of principle, but one is of a dark principle and one is of a lighter principle in that sense, morally. And I thought that was really good.
Yeah, what I liked about it as well is that from the first moment those two characters meet, Jim and Loeb, not only are they at loggerheads, but Jim has sniffed out, like a good detective sniffer dog, he sniffed out there's something wrong with Loeb. There's something that he doesn't like about him from the very moment they meet. We questioned it, I think, in episode 12. We questioned Jim challenging the commissioner this ardently or this strongly over his opinions and what he did to Jim. After all, the mayor is the one that sent him to Arkham. So the commissioner was only carrying out the mayor's orders, but Jim instantly realizes there's something wrong with this guy, and it's great to see the story play out the way it has. It's a really good end to that story arc.
Definitely. And I think then it comes to the second secret that Commissioner Loeb has as well then, which is Miriam Loeb.
Oh, yeah.
His daughter stuck up in the attic. I mean, it did remind me of The Simpsons with Bart's brother, stuck up in the attic being looked after in this remote farm. But to me, along with Harvey Bullock, Miriam Loeb here, played by Nicole Tom, was absolutely fantastic in all her kooky craziness, but also then the switch of her from this kind of childlike craziness and innocence, despite all that, to a sudden darkness that came across her as she talks about murdering her mother because she didn't let her speak, I think, or sing. It was her turn to sing.
That's right.
And that, to me, that switch back and forth between childlike innocence and this murderous adult with a real still burning passion for what she did was fantastic.
Definitely.
I just absolutely loved it. And this was Loeb's other secret, which I thought was absolutely great. And I just loved her whole interaction with Harvey Bullock and Jim Gordon. And then obviously there was her amazing little interaction with the Penguin. We can hear it here.
What's it made of?
Bones. Starlings. They land on my windowsill, and you can catch them if you're really silent and still. And I can be really silent and still. Silent as a mouse.
Then what do you do?
I crush the back of their heads. I just press down with my thumb. It makes like a popping noise. Pop.
Well, a deal's a deal. You have to let me in there.
Who's he? He looks just like a bird. Oh, I love birds.
Oh yeah, so that's her necklace made from starlings that she's talking about there, where it's catching them and crushing their necks just at the back of the head, and you wonder what she'll do to the penguin because he also looks like a bird.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was just there thinking, run, penguin, run. It was just the eyes as well of Nicole Tom as she kind of, it was like this childlike excitement that, oh look, here's another bird that I can snap the neck and make into some jewellery and stuff. You know, it's like the latest in bog standard bone jewellery by Miriam Loeb. You know, a penguin accessory. It was just so good in all its craziness. And this, along with another aspect, which I think is one of your points actually, Derek, but this to me just reminded me of The Simpsons with Bart Simpson's other brother Hugo up in the attic being looked after,
fed fish heads.
Yeah, being fed fish heads and crazy other stuff, unbeknownst to everyone else. And I loved Loeb's secret here. I just loved what comes round, what goes round comes around, and that actually maybe he learnt from personal experience that everyone does have a dirty little secret.
Absolutely. Nicole Tom is fantastic in this. I'm hoping that we get to see a bit more of her. I'd like to maybe see if they tone back just that crazy aspect that she wants to kill people. Perhaps she could become the Penguin's girlfriend, possibly in a season 2 or something like that. She could potentially have a relationship there. Yes, she's a little bit crazy right now, but yeah, I kind of like her little relationship with Penguin there.
Do you think she could be a Harley Quinn?
Maybe.
I mean,
could be the Penguin's Harley Quinn. Maybe she could be his sidekick. But there's definitely enough of the makeup in her as a character that she could become someone very attached to the Penguin who'll do anything for him, perhaps.
Yeah, because like Loeb is saying that she's up in the attic. She's kept away from sort of Gotham so that she wasn't put into Arkham.
That's right.
And we have Arkham now. It would be great if she becomes one of their first inmates. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. I would love to start seeing some of these people getting put away into Arkham Asylum. You know, it was such a good setup of it. We've had Jim there as well. We've had its links to Martha Wayne and her family. We've had the whole intrigue around Maroney and Falcone fighting over this district of Gotham. Mm-hmm. And it would be nice to see some characters from some of these episodes being put into Arkham so that, in a sense, it's like being banked, isn't it, I suppose? Mm-hmm. You can put them in there and bring them out later. And I think definitely Nicole Tom is pitch perfect to me as Miriam Loeb in her craziness and kookiness. Best of the season as far as I'm concerned in that sense. Mm-hmm. I loved her. I was absolutely enthralled by her, and I'd love to see her back again, just like you would. So let's bang her up in Arkham, mm-hmm. and maybe she'll escape and get a few more birds.
Oh, maybe. So my next point is actually about her captors, Marge, and I had to search this one up. Jude is the name given to Marge's husband or partner, both of whom are taking care of Miriam in this farmhouse, essentially. We don't get to find out much about Jude, but we get to find out a little bit about Marge. She's a former nurse from Arkham, so while Loeb didn't want to get his daughter sent to Arkham Asylum because of the stigma that would be on his family, really, and obviously the treatment that his daughter would get there, he did hire a former nurse from Arkham to take care of her in his own safe house or his own home. But I love these two. I think they are fantastic. The really homely couple that Jim and Oswald and Harvey arrive at their home, and they have, they've laid out a full cake for them and coffee and tea and all that kind of stuff, and they have some really fun interaction with them where they're just kind of looking like caretakers for a farmhouse. You find out very quickly that Marge is not just a homemaker. She goes and gets her gun pretty quickly, leading to one of the funniest scenes of the season so far, when Marge chases down Oswald and trips and knocks herself out on a.
It was so chaotic.
Furniture. It was fantastic, really, really enjoyable. But yes, as the episode itself goes on, we have Oswald essentially bringing the two of them in to cover up his secret, which is that he was working with Harvey and Jim, and has the two of them essentially go into battle royale, which is great. It felt like that similar kind of moment to the Joker in The Dark Knight, where he gives the option of two of the bodyguards for one of the guys from the Mafia. He gives the option to the two of them to fight it out, and only one can survive. In this case, he gives the option to Marge and Jude. I'll let you get out of the city. I've got one ticket for a train. And it is a fantastic scene with Oswald sitting back, having a drink, watching essentially Marge destroy Jude. And then she says, "So what time does the train leave?" And Oswald loads up his shotgun and said, "Well, actually, I only had one shell. So thanks for taking care of Jude for me." And then promptly kills her. It's one of the best executed comedy moments in the scene so far, I have to say. I'm going to give total credit for this to Megan Moyston Brown. She did a great job on Welcome Back, Jim Gordon, the other episodes she wrote, and I think she does a great job here, and the actors do a great job playing this kind of scene, so I'm hoping to see a lot more of that. Yeah,
this was brilliant. Again, I love the fact that Penguin is sipping on this really expensive liqueur from monks in Italy that only make, 100 bottles. He slowly gets up, meanders round the bar, picks up his shotgun, whilst Marge is throttling the hell out of Jude, her husband, and then he dispatches her. But I did love Margie, as she's known to Jude, from the font. For me, this was so Misery-esque. As soon as she picked up the shotgun, I just thought she was like Annie Wilkes from Misery. It was played obviously by the great Kathy Bates. And to me, she was psychotic, homely, a granny, a murderer. She was just like brilliant. And it was just great to see. And then, the chaotic moment where she trips and knocks herself out. I mean, that was just fantastic physical comedy, I thought. But I just loved how she cut this figure with a shotgun, and how so much like Misery with the remote farm, the snow, everything. I just thought she was going to come out with a massive sledgehammer and start hobbling people. Yeah. And I mean...
But although Oswald is already hobbled, so she wouldn't have had much work to do on him.
That is true. That is true.
The other leg, though, would be really difficult for him to get around.
But it was just fantastic characters playing out here. Definitely.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's two we're not going to see again. John, do you want to give us your next point?
Yeah, mine was Angry Ed.
Angry Ed.
Yeah, Ed Nigma. You see that flash of anger from him because of the revelation from Christine Kringle that she is now going out with an officer from the precinct called Tom.
That's right.
Flass has been banged up in prison on charges. He's now been released, but whilst he has, you thought they had something going on, or at least Flass had an interest in Christine Kringle. Yeah. There was that whole episode where he's like, what are you doing hanging around with this loser? Or, what's this loser doing here, speaking to you? Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, she has decided to move on to new pastures and to Tom. And this is built up over the episode where Enigma is beginning to get it into his head that she does actually really fancy him.
Yeah.
Because when the devastating news comes, he's got a bouquet of flowers and greenery to give to her, and to go out on a date, hopefully, or to ask her out on a date. And she's quite blunt back to him to say that she's already going out on a date and it's with Tom. And afterwards, you see the flash of angry Ed Nigma. Mm-hmm. It's the first time you've seen him lose his cool, on screen at least. he's always been quite maybe calculated or precise about his movements.
Yeah.
And here we see in the middle of the precinct, Enigma smashing the bouquet of flowers into the bin and then discarding them into that bin after Christine and Tom have left.
Yeah.
He's emotional and he's angry at that point, and I love that because this is the first flash for me, along with the creepiness and the OCDness of him, maybe starting that transformation from the Enigma, the forensic police officer, to the start of the Riddler.
Yeah.
And even just the fact that Tom uses a really weak riddle to put Enigma kind of down almost. He says, "Oh, you're the Riddler guy," And I love the fact that Tom almost sort of tries to be friends with Enigma by giving a really weak riddle to the Master of Riddles. Here it is here.
Have you met Tom?
You're the guy that likes riddles. Hey, what has hands but can't clap?
A clock.
Correct. He's good. You're good. It's nice to meet you. Riddle man. Next time. I'm gonna stump you.
Yes, next time.
Yeah, and it's just the expression on Enigma's face as he says, "A clock."
Yeah.
It is just pure contempt that riddle was even ushered forth in his direction. It's just fantastic. Yeah. And I think this is a good sign of a bit more Riddler-esque elements of Enigma coming out, I think.
Yeah, definitely one thing I want to point out about that clip is Tom calls him Riddleman. Next time I'm going to stump you, is what he says to him. Riddleman. So first person to really kind of give him a superhero or supervillain nickname, essentially. This has always just been Enigma in the past. Now he's gotten Riddleman as a little tag for himself. But yeah, poor Tom. Tom's trying his best, I think. I don't think he's really just trying to put him down. I think he's just trying out a few riddles on this guy that just to kind of break the ice with him, really. But yeah, it's not good. Poor Ed does not seem to like Tom at all.
No, and nothing because of what Tom has done, but because Christine has chosen Tom above Ed. Mm-hmm. Yet he has been getting the distinct impression that she is falling for him.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Derek, what's your next point?
My next point is actually kind of the Alfred, Bruce, Selina element of this episode. Just firstly, Alfred's not dead. No major damage.
Maybe we should have put that slightly earlier on in our 5-point case files.
We probably should have. But the description he gives is just a puncture, slight bit of leakage. That's why the description he gives.
I'm completely fine. Yeah, he says, true grit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stiff upper lip.
Which we knew, essentially, while we were tweeting about the episode last week, just after he got stabbed, Aaron Richards sent a tweet out saying, "Oh no, not Alfred," and got the response from Sean Pertwee going, "Don't worry, it's just a flesh wound, love." So Sean Pertwee did slightly spoil the fact that he was going to be still alive, but we knew our Alfred couldn't die. But what I liked about the episode is that it brings back in Selina, and she genuinely seems concerned for Bruce and genuinely shows her friendship to Bruce by saying she will help him track down Reggie, the person that did this to Alfred. And then Bruce's reaction I thought was really telling. I thought it was a really good moment for him. And once again, David Mazouz carries the scene really, really well, where he tells her, "I'm not going to put anybody else in danger. I'm going to go and do this myself." Such a Batman moment, and a motif that will carry on throughout his life, even when he's surrounded by Batgirl and Robin and Nightwing and all the Bat family, as they call them. He will always say, "I want to do these things myself." Anything personally connected to him, he will always push everybody away around him and say he wants to do it himself, so he doesn't put anybody else in harm's way. So I thought it was a really good indicator here that this is how he's going to treat Selina, even though she does want to help him.
Yeah, and he's also made the connection that Reggie Yeah, okay, he made it look as though he was just stealing stuff, but he knows that some of the files that he has built up over the course of his own investigation of his parents' murder have gone missing. Mm-hmm. And he links that then that Reggie has stolen some of these files, but that it must be connected to what's going on in Wayne Enterprises. So again, it shows his knack for investigation, but also his intelligence, his reasoning, and that's a really important element of what Bruce Wayne will become as he grows up as well.
That's right.
I did also like the silence, and again, this is another thing that will probably grow and grow between Alfred and Bruce as they become and lead towards becoming Alfred and Batman as this double act, as this duo as well. Mm-hmm. Just that they don't give up Reggie. They both want to deal with it. I mean, mm-hmm. Alfred actually tries to get up. He unplugs himself from all the monitors and all the needles that are going into him to give him fluids. You know, and he tries to go up and go after Reggie. And he does say to Bruce, if anyone's going to sort him out, it will be me. Don't set cops on your mates. It's this kind of honor that Alfred has, that if anyone's going to bring justice and bring him to heel, it's going to be him, not Jim Gordon. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting little point, I think, for the character, and it also that silence that occurs when Jim is there in the hospital room, and they don't give up Reggie is telling as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Really good scenes there with the two of them. So, John, what's your final point?
Mine is Harvey Dent. We see Harvey Dent come back. It's only a minor point, and it's quite a little point here. But you know, Harvey Dent is enrolled by Jim Gordon to begin to investigate the reasons for why Flass was released, and in particular to look at the role of Commissioner Loeb here. Yeah. And it was quite nice to see Harvey Dent back in Gotham, to be honest. And I love the urgency to Jim's pursuit with Harvey Dent and the trouble that they get into with Shilu, where Detective Grigg, they think he's giving up Commissioner Loeb when in fact he's essentially sending them into a trap. It shows the stretch of Loeb's influence, and I love then as well that this all leads to the redemption of Harvey by coming in a bit like the MCU did to save Jim, crashing through the gates to protect and save Jim Gordon and Harvey Dent from a load of workers at the drug house or the laundering house, you know, fronted by a Chinese restaurant at the Chinese mafia, trying to kill them with knives after they've been set up by Griggs. Yeah. And what ensues then is where kind of Harvey Dent is told by Harvey Bullock that, you know, you shouldn't really be here. You know, you're in way too deep, and you need to leave this essentially to Jim and myself. Yeah. You can't handle this. So I loved that. I thought it was a nice little way of just keeping the character on the boil, but not necessarily having to do anything too much. So it'd be interesting to see whether Harvey Dent does anything more sort of in relation to investigating Commissioner Loeb by keeping it on his turf. But despite all that, and despite me saying that, we do find that Jim thinks of Commissioner Loeb as better the devil you know. Yeah. For him now, he has Loeb in his own pocket because he knows Loeb's secret in the same way that Loeb has been doing that for everyone else. And so he probably won't, I don't think, Harvey Dent. I don't think he will necessarily try and bring Commissioner Loeb down. But it'd be interesting to see how he's worked in to future episodes and how his storyline will slowly simmer away in the background of the episodes, the remaining episodes of season 1, but also maybe into season 2. In the same way that I think both the Penguin and Ed Nygma have been really good characters, bad characters that we all know what's coming, but how they've just kept them sort of on the simmer. I think the other, as I've mentioned them, this is like the 7th episode since a member of the MCU has last been on Gotham.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, it was episode 11, and it was Detective Renee Montoya, who was there breaking up with Barbara Keene. And we haven't seen them at all now. And so I think it's 7 episodes at this stage. Yeah, well, it is. I can do maths. Yeah. 18 minus 11 is 7, everyone. But that's kind of slightly worrying to me now. And I think maybe we need to see or know what's happened to them. I think it's a bit odd that they haven't been on the screen at all in technically 7 hours worth of Gotham, after having been fairly regular reoccurring characters and central in some cases to an episode, and indeed to one of the big love triangles of Jim, Barbara, and then obviously Renee Montoya. I would love to know where they have gone and why that might be the case, because I do think that they were really good characters. I also do think that it was a really good way of expanding the Gotham universe and canon from the comics into TV through the GCPD and other units like the MCU. So, unfortunately, it's 7 episodes now without seeing them, and I'd really like to see them back.
Yeah, definitely. Like, while I do enjoy seeing Nicholas D'Agosto's Harvey Dent, I think he's a character that you need to keep exploring, keep making sure that everybody's aware that himself and Jim are developing a relationship and developing a friendship, and that they know each other for a long time. I think that's hugely important. It would have been just as good in this particular episode to have Harvey and Jim going in to see Shi-Lu behind the Chinese restaurant, and the MCU coming in because they happen to be investigating a drug ring and saving Jim and Harvey, just to keep those characters alive a bit. It's going to seem weird if they do turn back up in episode 20 or 21 or 22. It's going to seem weird now. You've had almost 10 episodes at that stage where they haven't been appearing, so you're going to have to re-explain who the MCU are if you want to have them turn up again. So it's a bit of a pity. I have a feeling we may not see them again, and that would be completely unfair to the two quite major characters from the comic book, and a big reason why a lot of people did tune into the show, or a lot of, let me not say a lot of people, a lot of very in-depth comic fans tuned into the show to see what they do with these two characters, and it's unfortunate that we lost them.
I mean, the only thing at the moment that, I'm holding on to hope, I always do, I'm an eternal optimist, is that these two off-screen are deep undercover, maybe something to do with investigating Wayne Enterprises. They've got to be under the radar, and maybe, they crop up towards the end in relation to the storyline with Bruce and Wayne Enterprises, where they're keeping an eye on Bruce, or even into season 2, if maybe we don't see them from now on, that it's explained in a way that seems appropriate and real for the work that they have to do, which is ultimately major crimes, which could mean infiltration and taking a cover. That's the only thing to me now at this stage that would kind of make sense, actually. Otherwise, as you say, they show up and you've had a large amount of time passing where any sizable screen presence has occurred. And you're right, the danger comes that you have to reintroduce them. And so, I'm still positive. It certainly links to a prediction that Chris, who joins us on Defenders TV Podcast, mentioned in our European Roundtable roundup of the first 10 episodes. He thought that they would potentially be quite divisive characters, possibly for an audience, certainly given maybe complications surrounding sort of the breakup of Jim and Barbara, possibly, and all that.
TV should be complicated and TV should be challenging. It doesn't excuse getting rid of two major characters because it was complicated for the audience.
I completely
it's a
agree.
late enough time slot. There's intelligent people watching this show. they can work out a better way to deal with those two characters than what's happened to them. And it is unfortunate that they've been off the scene for so many episodes so far. Hopefully they're going to come back, and hopefully we'll see them play a bigger part as we go on.
Touch wood, fingers crossed, legs crossed, toes crossed, stroke the rabbit's foot, etc., etc.
Right.
So Derek, what's your final point?
Very small point. Most of the things we've already talked about, but just a very small point that essentially Jim has talked about. Obviously that he is an incorruptible cop. What happens at the end of the episode? He essentially blackmails Loeb to make him the GCPD union leader, which I thought was quite interesting. It's kind of like blackmail is acceptable as long as the person you're doing it to is a bad guy. That's what it seems like. He's essentially saying to him, well, now I know your secret. Give me the files on all of the GCPD officers. Loeb says no. He gives him Harvey's files, so Harvey's now off the hook. The rest of the GCPD officers aren't. But Jim essentially takes the leadership of the GCPD union. So he's kind of blackmailed them. So he's kind of done a little bit of a shady deal there. But I like that Jim is a little bit of a grey character occasionally, not just black and white. So that's just one element I pulled out from it.
Yeah, no, I like that aspect too. It would have been interesting if he had said to have the files for internal affairs to look at in case he needed to. But obviously that would implicate Harvey Bullock into a murder. So it's strange then as well that then Jim just takes Harvey's, which is then, is he going to burn it so that Harvey is kind of released from that emotional baggage, whereas all the others aren't, because Harvey does say that half of the cops in the GCPD have got files on them.
What a way to clean up the GCPD for Jim. It would have been pretty easy. Okay, well, these guys here to the left, these guys here to the right, I'm becoming commissioner, and off you go.
But again, I love the grey area in that, we had Jim Gordon talk about not wanting to do any kind of deals or any business with Oswald Cobblepot. And what does he have to do? What forces his hand in this episode but to, again, better the devil you know. Yeah. He goes to Oswald and asks him to find out information. He asks him for a favour. And what does Oswald get back in return? The promise of 5 minutes with all the files. Okay, they don't turn out to be actually at the farm, and we still don't know where they're kept, but not at the farm. But also to ask for a favour at a future date from Jim Gordon.
That's right.
So what is Oswald going to ask? I mean, to me, this just does sound like a get out of jail card in Monopoly for Oswald. Fair plays to Oswald, because Jim has kind of put him down as well. He said, I'm not coming to your opening of Oswald's.
That's right.
I'm not going to have any part to play with you. But he does keep coming on back to Oswald because Oswald is a friend and Oswald is a good snitch. Yeah. And in the comics, some of the storylines written on Oswald is that he is a cop, is a snitch for the cops. So it's a really good little dynamic between the two of them. And it also, again, as you say, with the blackmail of Commissioner Loeb, it keeps the greyness about Jim Gordon as well, which is great.
Yeah, definitely. But you're right. That's one thing I definitely want to know. What is Oswald going to ask of Jim in future? I certainly wouldn't give him any favour that he could possibly ask for as a bargaining chip at any time. Now Oswald has got something over Jim. So, yeah, tough.
So then, I think that's the end of our discussion on this episode. Everyone's got a Cobblepot. Got any other notes? I think I am all used up with my notes. I know we've got a bit of news to talk about. Have you got any other notes on this episode?
Nothing really that stood out to me. Additionally, on this episode, we're starting to wind down now. We've only got about 4 episodes left, so make sure you send us your feedback on any future episodes or anything you thought so far during the season to feedback@GothamTVPodcast.com.
Fascinating.
So we have a little piece of feedback this week from Doug Green, who came into our Twitter account. So Doug asks, the scarecrows at the end of the episode Scarecrow, are they up to the Doctor Who standard? Are they like Doctor Who monsters? What do you think?
I think so. I think the really scary monsters that you can get in Doctor Who, most definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing, though, that Doctor Who still can do better than any other show are quietly subtle and menacing monsters. So I'm thinking of the Weeping Angels.
Mm-hmm.
On the face of it, there is nothing to them, but the concept of them is absolutely deadly. I think of the Christmas special in 2014, where it mixed aliens and Eraserheads with kind of Father Christmas.
Yeah.
And again, not what I was expecting from all of the trailers leading up to that episode, which seemed to be, oh no, it's got Father Christmas in it. How is it going to work? And I love Nick Frost as well. I mean, Nick Frost plays Santa Claus. It's really, really well done.
Mm-hmm.
I think with Doctor Who, when it's done right, I think they can do monsters and concepts of monsters that really no other show really gets to be able to do, not on such a frequent basis. And maybe that's part of it. It's just the frequency of the new ideas. I always remember the other Stephen Moffat monster, the darkness in the library, where you have then the skeletons walking around in spacesuits. Again, just pretty terrifying and menacing, but not as such massively scary.
Yeah.
But when they do big scary monsters, I thought the Scarecrow at the end, climbing up over Jonathan Crane's bed, that was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another example of really good CG, which
That's
unfortunately the office manager attached to Sally from the Nightmare Before Christmas wasn't in this case.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in this episode, everyone has a Cobblepot, of which I think mine's flared up again, actually.
So thanks very much for the feedback, Doug. So if you want to send us your feedback, please send an email to feedback@gothamtvpodcast.com. As we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you could be in with a chance of winning a really cool prize. So thanks very much for the feedback.
Yeah, remember as well, you can listen to us and catch us on gothamtvpodcast.com/iTunes. You can also search for us on Stitcher or Player FM or any other good podcast catcher. Just search Gotham TV Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter and on Facebook at Gotham TV Podcast. Please search and you can leave comments and thoughts there. But I think with that, we can move on to the news. So we've got two items of news this week. We have the news that Frank Miller is going to return to the Dark Knight Returns series and to Batman with a comic series and graphic novel entitled Master Race.
Yes, I'm really excited about this one. I'm a big Frank Miller fan and a huge fan of The Dark Knight Returns. The one sequel that they did have to Dark Knight Returns wasn't unfortunately up to the standard of that book, but they've left it a good long time now to kind of come up with a really good idea for the Master Race. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they did. Frank Miller really is, to me, one of the quintessential Batman authors. He also has written Daredevil, which is the show we're talking about over on Defenders TV Podcast. And I've loved his work on there. I've also loved some of the other books that he's done. So I'm really excited to see what he does coming into a newly refreshed look at the Dark Knight universe, I suppose. There was some confusion, which we noticed on when we saw the news going up. There was some confusion that this would be a sequel to the movie The Dark Knight Rises, that Frank Miller would be writing the character played by Christian Bale in the film for some reason. Don't understand where this came from. I presume there's a lot of people that may not have read comic books or may not know who Frank Miller is. He's the quintessential Batman author, as I said. He's the one that brought the darkness to him in the 80s and pretty much with the Dark Knight Returns books. So I'm really excited to hear what he does.
Yeah, I think for that reason, I'm quite excited to see what he writes in this series of comics, and hopefully it'll be collected again into another classic graphic novel. But I mean, he's been the source of Christopher and Jonathan Nolan for some of their aspects that they have taken of Batman and put into their films. There's obviously a nice, big, chunky, meaty hint of it in the forthcoming Zack Snyder movie, Batman vs. Superman, The Dawn of Justice, because, you know, we have Meatball Batman there. Well, I mean, just like Affleck. Chunky. Like, I mean, you know, he's complete, older, chunky meathead, which is portrayed in Frank Miller's comics, The Dark Knight Returns, so well. I mean, this idea that you have that older Batman who's kind of creaking, it's a great concept. I think they may have taken it a little far with Batman 100, but nonetheless, I do think he's been such an influence to other comic book writers. He's been an influence and a source for Batman in the movies as well, that I'm really looking forward to what he brings us.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. The other news this week was in celebration of the 75th anniversary of the Joker, which we have been talking about for a while. This is the 75th year since the character of Joker appeared in comic books. And as a little, I suppose, as a little present for all of us Joker fans out here, David Ayers did tweet out a photograph of a very well-known character played by an Oscar-winning actor. John?
Musician,
yes.
It was the new 30 Seconds to Mars poster.
Yes, he's probably had a few extra tattoos added, though, since the last time I saw him.
Sorry, I mean, there was Jared Leto as the Joker.
That's right.
What did you think?
Very interesting. Very interesting. Very different take.
Liked it, hated it, loved it, not bothered?
I
want to wait till we see the full thing on the film?
I can't wait to see Jared Leto's take on the character. Really can't. I really can't wait to see him in motion and see him take on the character. Jared Leto is a great actor, as evidenced by his performance that won him the Oscar. You know, he's fantastic as an actor and doesn't act often enough. An image of him as the Joker covered in tattoos that say ha 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 and have the smiley face on them looks a little much from the tattoos. But it's a static photograph. I'll never judge a film by a static photograph.
Exactly.
The one thing that I did say when I was talking about it with my friends is that I do feel that this version of the Joker probably won't appear very much in the film. I think he will probably be a very small minor point in this film, setting him up for a future film where he's the lead character, a future Batman film, which has been mooted with Ben Affleck playing Batman versus Jared Leto's Joker. But I think he looks pretty cool. He does look pretty cool. It's just when you start to analyze the tattoos that are on his body, they seem odd. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I like the concept of the tattoos on the body, given he may be in prison or he may be in Arkham Asylum. You think of the Russian tattoos that you get, that idea, but ha 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 ha, maybe a bit too much. Even smiley face, I mean, a big emoticon on the side of your arm, it is slightly strange. Although I did hear an interesting thing, which was the smile on his hand. He could put his hand over his mouth, and it would look like the classic Joker. And given his teeth are very kind of grey and look rotten, that could be a really good concept. I like the idea of that.
Interesting, and I wish again, listeners, that we had a video podcast, because John continually covered his mouth through most of that what he was saying, and it looked pretty cool.
I like the colour in the hair and in the glove, the flash of purple and green, nice little nods. Maybe he didn't need so many tattoos, but I could see where he could get them from. Ultimately, like you say, don't judge a book by its cover, and literally do not judge a film by a single photo.
Absolutely.
It's difficult to do that, to say that you're going to hate the character of the Joker or dislike Jared Leto's performance because of that one photo. And indeed, think of the response to Heath Ledger as well, and what he ultimately has become to the canon of this great bad guy the counterpoint to Batman.
Mm-hmm.
I did also see recently it written that The Killing Joke, because there has been that other picture released of Jared Leto in the pose of the Joker that you see on the front of The Killing Joke by Alan Moore, holding the camera and pointing it at the reader with the big grin on his face. And I did see written that apparently that was a divisive graphic novel at the time, but I've never heard that before.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the idea of turning the Joker, who was the funny character that you could give your kids the book of Batman that had the Joker in it, because it's a funny novel or a funny comic book. Killing Joke turned that into the really brutal Joker that we see now, that kills all around him and slaughters all around him and cuts and slices all around him. That's what Killing Joke did. That's why it was a decisive book, because it was for adults and not for kids.
And so basically we see throughout the creation of all of these characters, with Joker, even with Batman, along these steps of evolution of the character and development, there's always been that moment where it's been split. And I do think that, again, this could be another one of those moments that takes the Joker into a different area and a different way of being viewed. So it's exciting. That's how I see it.
You certainly don't get to 75 years old and look like Jared Leto without making a few changes.
I thought he was 175.
Potentially.
The Joker, not Jared Leto.
And with that, I think we'll leave it for this week. Next week, we're back with episode 19 of Gotham, which is Beasts of Prey, starring Milo Ventimiglia, who I never knew his surname before. I just know him as the main actor from Heroes first season. He's going to be playing a character called the Ogre. I'm really looking forward to this one now.
No, I'm looking forward to this one as well, definitely.
Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Speak to you next week. Bye.
'Cause I like birds. I don't care for walking downtown. Crazy auto car gonna mow me down. Look at all the people like cows in a herd. Well, I like birds.